We know very little about Atlantis, and the small amount that we do know comes from the fictionalized stories of Plato's writings. You can create so much more meaning and extrapolate so much more depth from oral history storytelling like this than you can simply by just describing facts about history. But no matter how many times Plato himself expressed that his stories were never meant to describe factual information about the past, his audience would often make the mistake of taking his stories literally, and his story about Atlantis is probably the best example of this. Even the way Plato describes how he learned about Atlantis in the first place is kind of sketchy. A young man named Dropides told Plato an anecdote about his grandfather Solon, who had apparently traveled to Egypt as part of a cultural exchange. Solon apparently found inscriptions of a mysterious place called Atlantis, and he was told by an Egyptian priest that there were civilizations much older than Egypt and Greece that were lost to time many eons ago. I believe that Plato intentionally framed the story of Atlantis in this way to make it more believable, further removing his audience from the source of the information, placing this anecdote on a trustworthy old man who had died many years ago. This is a framing device that many hoaxers and storytellers today still use, saying that they heard it from this old guy that knew what he was talking about. But I don't think that Plato was intentionally trying to trick his audience into believing that the legend of Atlantis is true. Framing the legend as if it's true creates more tension in the story. It made the drama more visceral and gave his audience more investment in the characters and the outcomes. And the story is also framed as a conflict between Atlantis and the nation of Athens. Again, this is to create a connection between his audience and the story of Atlantis. In the same exact way that Homer's Iliad creates a connection between the Greek audience and the story of the fall of Troy by framing it as a conflict between Troy and the entirety of Greece. Many of those ancient Greek stories about history explored heroism, bravery, humility, love, sacrifice, assumptions, disappointments, and the cost of honor. The story of Atlantis is not about the city of Atlantis itself. It was a highly romanticized myth that Plato used as a platform to teach his audience about humanity. Myths are useful for communicating stories about the human condition, morality, and all sorts of abstract concepts that can't be properly explored through direct discussion. The story of Troy might be loosely based on some kind of reality. We all know now that the city of Troy was real and their kingdom lasted a pretty long time. So it's possible that the story of Atlantis is also loosely based on some sort of reality. Maybe it was inspired by something that actually happened.